It began in the late spring of 1940, when Britain stood alone. The fall of France had left the English Channel as the last fragile barrier between Hitler's divisions and the home islands. In the corridors of London's wartime ministries, few people noticed a 21-year-old Oxford student walking quietly toward a bus bound for Bletchley, Buckinghamshire. Her name was Mavis Batey, a librarian by training, fluent in German by curiosity, and destined to change the course of naval warfare without ever stepping on a ship. The newly established Government Code and Cipher School, codenamed Bletchley Park, was a collection of mathematicians, linguists, librarians, crossword puzzle enthusiasts, and forgotten scholars. They operated out of drafty wooden huts on a Victorian estate surrounded by mud and secrecy. Mavis arrived with a folder of references and a fountain pen assigned to Hut 6 under the supervision of Dilwyn Knox, an eccentric classical scholar whose memory for Greek fragments rivaled his understanding of enigmas rotors. Her work began humbly, filing intercepted Italian naval messages, sorting cipher groups, cataloguing code books that the Royal Navy's intercept stations had captured from Italian trawlers in the Mediterranean. But behind those mechanical tasks was a rhythm of concentration, pencil strokes, paper rustle, the steady hum of decoding machines. Mavis learned to recognize patterns in letters the way a librarian recognizes order on shelves. By midsummer 1940, she had already memorized entire sequences of Italian naval call signs. Each pattern told a hidden story of movement: convoys bound for North Africa, destroyers sweeping for British submarines, and the slow breathing of a navy that thought its signals were unreadable. Outside Bletchley, Britain was reeling. The Blitz was beginning, and the Royal Navy was desperate to intercept Axis convoys supplying Rommel. Inside Hut 4, the Italian section was drowning in traffic, thousands of enciphered messages pouring in daily from Alexandria, Malta, and Gibraltar. One morning, Mavis noticed a repeated cluster, FLMT-ESVO. It appeared in multiple transmissions from Rome to Taranto. It wasn't random. Her instinct, shaped by years of cataloguing index cards, told her it was a routine word, perhaps transmission, convoy, or weather. She marked it, compared it, and within hours began reconstructing the wiring of a new Italian cipher variant. In early 1941, that intuition paid off. Mavis broke the Italian naval enigma key used by the fleet supporting the battleship Vittorio Veneto. Her discovery reached the Admiralty through a chain of secrecy so tight that even the captains receiving the orders didn't know their source. When the Royal Navy engaged the Italian fleet off Cape Matapan on the 28th of March 1941, British ships were already positioned for ambush. 3 Italian heavy cruisers and 2 destroyers were sunk. Over 2,400 Italian sailors perished. The official reports credited radar and luck. Few outside Bletchley knew that a librarian's pencil had guided British guns to their targets. The success marked a turning point inside Bletchley Park. Mavis's team, once seen as auxiliary, became vital. She continued to file reports under the bland heading Naval Intercept Correlations, while the world outside believed women at Bletchley were secretaries. In truth, they were code architects. Through 1941 and 1942, her days blurred into shifts of 14 hours. Coffee in tin mugs, paper cuts, the clack of typewriters. Each intercept she handled might conceal the fate of convoys carrying food, fuel, and soldiers. She grew attuned to the pulse of war in letters, the rhythm of defeat, the cadence of deception. When messages hinted at U-boat positions near Gibraltar, she worked through the night, tracing probable grid references. That data rerouted merchant ships and saved hundreds of lives. By 1942, Bletchley had expanded into a labyrinth of huts. Electric heaters fought the winter cold. Blackout curtains sealed every window. To outsiders it was monotony, filing cabinets, bicycles leaning against fences. Yet within that monotony, discoveries unfolded daily. Mavis's greatest came when she intercepted an Italian signal containing the phrase C3P. It referred to a cipher table believed unbreakable. Her analysis revealed that the table reused elements of a German diplomatic key, a connection no one else had seen. It opened a bridge between Italian and German codes that allowed the Allies to read coordination traffic before the Axis itself did. The effect was strategic. Convoy routes in the Mediterranean were adjusted with uncanny precision. British submarines found targets they accidentally encountered. Generals in Cairo received forecasts of Axis supply shortages days in advance. Mavis's name appeared only in internal memoranda. Lever, linguistic analysis. Her fiancé, John Batey, another codebreaker, later said that she never spoke of her work even to him until after the war. In that silence, she carried the knowledge of ships diverted, lives preserved, and battles tilted toward victory. As 1943 dawned, the Allies prepared to invade Sicily. Every detail, tides, landing zones, naval routes, depended on knowing Axis deployments. Hut 4's Italian section, with Mavis at its core, delivered decrypted messages that revealed minefield charts and coastal gun placements. When Allied troops landed on 10 July 1943, they faced less resistance than expected. The secret behind that success remained locked behind Official Secrets Act clauses for decades. Mavis returned to her desk the next morning, already tackling new German cipher variants. Outside the gates, the world knew nothing. Newspapers spoke of Churchill's speeches, fighter aces, and tank breakthroughs. Inside the huts, quiet figures like Mavis Batey were redrawing the boundaries of intelligence. She didn't wear uniform insignia or rank. Her weapon was insight, the ability to see order where others saw chaos. The war would last 2 more years, but by then, the balance in the Mediterranean had shifted irreversibly. The Librarian, who had once catalogued novels, now catalogued the war itself, line by line, until the codes yielded their secrets. By the spring of 1943, the Mediterranean had begun to change colour. Convoys that once vanished beneath Axis bombs now crossed safely under British escort. To the commanders studying their maps, the improvement seemed the result of better tactics. Few guessed that the stream of intelligence flowing to the Admiralty still passed through the hands of a quiet young woman in Hut 4. Mavis Batey, now 23, had moved from Italian naval ciphers to the far more dangerous puzzle of German communications. Her mentor, Dilwyn Knox, was dying of cancer, but continued to dictate fragments of wiring sequences from his bed. He called her Batey my girl, and passed to her the half-finished problems that even Alan Turing's bomb machines struggled to interpret. The new challenge was the Abwehr enigma used by German military intelligence. Unlike the standard enigma machines of the Wehrmacht or Luftwaffe, the Abwehr model had additional notches and irregular stepping that defeated most mechanical attacks. Mavis approached it the only way she knew, by hand. Each morning she sifted through intercepted messages that began with formal salutations. Heil Hitler. Abwehrstelle, Hamburg. She noticed that German clerks reused greetings, repeated sign-offs, and kept the rhythm of bureaucrats rather than soldiers. Those habits became her entry points. In November 1943, she found a breakthrough. A series of Abwehr reports from Madrid to Berlin contained identical word endings where a cipher operator had mistakenly repeated a rotor position. She cross-checked it against earlier traffic and found the internal logic of the machine's stepping. It took 3 weeks of sleepless nights, but when her pencil drew the final wiring diagram, the Abwehr enigma was broken. The implications rippled outward like a silent explosion. Through those decrypts, British intelligence uncovered the full network of German spies operating in neutral countries. Many were double agents already controlled by MI5 under the double-cross system. But now, for the first time, Bletchley could read the instructions Berlin sent them. Every deception message sent back to Germany could now be perfectly tailored, a mirror game of lies and truths that would later become central to Operation Fortitude, the great deception plan for the D-Day invasion. While the world above ground prepared for liberation, The war underground deepened. Mavis worked in 12-hour rotations, subsisting on weak tea and condensed milk sandwiches. The walls of Hut 6 dripped with condensation, and blackout paper curled from the windows. Outside, American trucks rolled through Bletchley's gates, carrying IBM punch card machines and crates of intercepted traffic from the Atlantic. Inside, Mavis and her small team hand-checked cipher runs before the data entered the electromechanical bombs. The machine could spin rotors faster than any human, but only intuition could decide where to start. Her notebooks from this period, declassified decades later, show columns of pencil marks in faint graphite. Next to one she wrote simply, "Probable weather preamble. See Dilly." Those 3 words led to another key variant being solved. Each minor victory unlocked the next, a chain reaction of insight that by early 1944 allowed Bletchley to read most Abwehr traffic within hours. As Allied planners in London debated where to land in France, those decrypted messages confirmed that Hitler's high command expected the invasion to come through the Pas-de-Calais. The deception, fed by the double-cross network and verified by the Abwehr decrypts, was working. Mavis's pencil had become part of the machinery steering the largest amphibious operation in history. On 6 June 1944, D-Day began. In the chaos of thousands of ships crossing the Channel, the contribution of one librarian remained invisible. Yet the messages flowing into Bletchley that morning told a different story. German commanders at Calais insisting the Normandy landings were feints, waiting for the real assault that never came. Hours later, as paratroopers secured their drop zones and beachheads expanded, the decrypts confirmed total confusion among enemy ranks. The illusion held. Mavis Batey's quiet calculations had helped misdirect an army. After the invasion, the focus shifted to Germany itself. As Allied forces advanced, intercepted communications poured in faster than anyone could process. The enigma's secrets now served more humanitarian ends, tracing prisoner of war camps, locating Red Cross convoys, and predicting V-weapon launches. Mavis moved between huts, training new recruits while continuing to analyze remaining Abwehr networks. She rarely left Bletchley, except for brief bicycle rides into the Buckinghamshire countryside, where fields of wheat swayed under barrage balloon cables. The contrast between that calm and the carnage she read about daily was impossible to reconcile. When Knox died in February 1943, months before D-Day but after his greatest pupil had surpassed him, she kept his photograph above her desk. She believed his spirit still guided the logic of every deciphered line. To the outside world, she was merely a clerk in the Foreign Office. Her parents never knew the scale of her work. Even her letters home spoke only of routine clerical duties. By late 1944, the Allies began to intercept the last desperate signals of the collapsing Reich. Messages from Abwehr stations pleaded for instructions that would never come. On one damp evening that autumn, Mavis decoded a transmission from Oslo, reporting the surrender of an entire German network. She placed the paper in a file marked "Closed," no further traffic. It was the quietest form of victory, a battle ended by silence. When Germany finally surrendered in May 1945, the huts of Bletchley Park erupted in subdued relief. No cheering, no champagne, just tired faces, laughter edged with disbelief. Mavis walked through the park one last time, past rows of bicycles and piles of burnt papers from the code rooms. The Official Secrets Act still bound her. She could tell no one what she had done. That summer, she married John Batey and left intelligence work altogether. She became again what she had been before the war, a scholar, a lover of books, a quiet observer of human order amid chaos. The war receded, but its consequences lived on in the lives she had helped save. The convoys rerouted, the ships not sunk, the soldiers who reached beaches alive. For years she never spoke of Bletchley Park. Only in the 1970s, when the government finally declassified portions of the ultra-secret, did her name emerge. Journalists sought the story of the girl codebreaker, and she corrected them gently. I was never a mathematician. I was a librarian who liked solving puzzles. The statement was modest, but history proved it true. Her skills were not those of machines, but of mind. Pattern recognition, linguistic rhythm, empathy with the unseen enemy. She had turned the logic of cataloguing into an art of war. By the time the public learned of Bletchley's work, Mavis was living in the English countryside, tending gardens and writing about historical landscapes. Few who met her connected the gardener and historian with the woman whose deciphering had guided fleets and foiled invasions. The British librarian, who broke codes without anyone knowing, had, in her own quiet way, changed the direction of ships and lives, and then quietly shelved herself back into history's archives. When the guns fell silent in Europe, Bletchley Park fell silent with them. Within weeks, the huts that had pulsed day and night with decoding work were emptied, their contents burned, their furniture carted away under official orders. The world entered peace with no knowledge of what had happened there. For Mavis Batey, the quiet was both relief and burden. She was 24, already a veteran of a war fought entirely in cipher. She returned to civilian life in London, where the sound of typewriters and the shuffle of paper could still stir a phantom echo of Hut 4. Britain, in the first years after victory, had no parades for its code breakers. The Official Secrets Act was absolute. To speak of Bletchley was treasonous, so Mavis did what she had always done best. She organised. She joined her husband in the diplomatic service and later in the National Trust, quietly curating the architecture and gardens of a country recovering from rubble. While soldiers wrote memoirs and generals published plans, she catalogued plants, manor houses, and forgotten letters. In doing so, she preserved another kind of history, one rooted not in secrecy, but in continuity. Yet the memory of wartime work never truly faded. Now and then, she would see a newspaper photo of a ship or a city she knew had once been saved by a message decrypted on her watch. The knowledge carried no public credit, only private meaning. She often said later that she never felt heroic. She had simply done her duty with pencil and patience. But historians would come to see her as something rarer, a bridge between the humanist traditions of scholarship and the emerging science of information. In the late 1950s and 60s, the world entered the Cold War. Governments built new listening stations, new computers, new code machines. The people who designed them rarely knew that the principles they used, pattern frequency, permutation analysis, redundancy elimination, had first been proven on Mavis's blotter pads. While others claimed the age of computing as a triumph of mathematics, the roots of that logic trace back to the hands of linguists and librarians who had worked by candlelight. Batey herself never joined the new intelligence agencies. She chose instead to study the landscapes of England, publishing essays on gardens and medieval towns. It was her way of restoring order to a world that had nearly destroyed itself through mechanized chaos. Then, in 1974, something remarkable happened. The British government, under pressure from historians and former veterans, released the first official acknowledgements of Bletchley Park's existence. Newspapers ran cautious headlines. Secret war of the codebreakers revealed. Reporters hunted for survivors who could speak. For the first time in 30 years, Mavis Batey could breathe freely about the work that had defined her youth. But she did not rush to the microphones. When finally interviewed, she spoke softly and factually, of Dilly Knox's brilliance, of Italian intercepts, of the Abwehr messages that had deceived Hitler. Her clarity stunned the journalists. She recalled cipher groups as if they were musical notes, and she insisted that the true heroes were the thousands who never received recognition. Public curiosity grew. By the 1980s, Bletchley Park had become a subject of books and documentaries. Mavis began lecturing at universities and historical societies, explaining the human side of codebreaking. She described how the intuition of women trained in libraries and language departments had filled the gaps machines could not reach. She argued that logic and empathy were partners, not opposites. that understanding an enemy's habits required imagination as much as arithmetic. Audiences listened, astonished, as she made the connection between wartime analysis and everyday organization. The same mental discipline that could restore a lost medieval garden, she said, could also restore the meaning hidden in an encrypted message. Her later years became a second life of quiet influence. She helped preserve Bletchley Park itself from demolition when developers sought to erase it in the early 1990s. She wrote letters, raised funds, and guided restoration teams through the old huts she once worked in. The smell of damp wood and the sight of faded wiring diagrams returned her to 1941 in an instant. Visitors later recalled seeing her standing alone in Hut 6, eyes half closed, tracing the memory of where the bomb once stood. It was as if she were cataloguing time itself. When the modern museum finally opened, her role was formally recognized. Her wartime notes and memoirs became invaluable sources for historians mapping the evolution of cryptanalysis. She was awarded honors late in life, though she wore them lightly. To friends, she remained the same, witty, modest, devoted to her garden. Asked once if she ever felt overlooked, she replied, "Not at all. The codes were meant to be broken, not the people." Mavis Batey lived into her 90s. She watched new generations rediscover Bletchley through films, novels, and academic studies. Each new retelling embellished the drama, the tension, the romance, the machines. But few captured what she considered the essence: the stillness of thought amid noise, the faith that small patterns mattered. In interviews, she often returned to that idea, order out of chaos. It was the same impulse that had drawn her to library science before the war, to bring meaning to fragments. In her final years, she spoke more openly about the women of Bletchley. She emphasized that 3/4 of the workforce were women, operators, translators, statisticians, and that without them, the system would have collapsed. She disliked the romantic myths that reduced their roles to background. They were, she said, the structure holding up the roof. Historians now credit that generation as pioneers of information analysis, the first data scientists in everything but name. By the time she passed away in 2013, the once secret code-breaking estate had become a national monument. Visitors walked the gravel paths between huts 4 and 6, reading plaques about the men and women who had laboured there. Among them, a small display case held one of Mavis's original notepads, pencil lines fading, but legible still. Beside it, a caption read, "Her quiet mind saved lives." In the decades since her death, the legacy of Mavis Batey continues in subtle ways. Every encrypted email, every cybersecurity algorithm, every digital key owes a conceptual debt to the human pattern recognition she exemplified. What began as ink on paper in wartime huts evolved into the foundation of modern information theory. Yet the moral remains unchanged. Technology serves best when guided by human intuition. Looking back, historians describe her as the librarian who redirected fleets. But that label, like all summaries, misses the heart of the story. She did not seek to change history. She sought to understand it. Her patience turned confusion into clarity, her curiosity into strategy, and her silence into one of the most profound acts of wartime intelligence. When her family sorted through her belongings, they found boxes of garden sketches, essays, and only a handful of wartime papers, carefully filed, meticulously labelled, just as she had kept them 70 years earlier. Each sheet was a reminder that preservation and discovery are two halves of the same calling. The war had taught her that even chaos can be catalogued, if someone cares enough to listen. And so, long after the guns went quiet and the enigma machines rusted away, the echo of pencil on paper lingers. The story of the British librarian who broke codes without anyone knowing ends not with a shout of triumph, but with the turning of a page, the softest sound of victory imaginable.